What's going on, everybody? KD here, and welcome back to the 28th official episode of the King Darius Experience. I'm excited for our awakening and our empowering today, and it is coming by way of learning the anatomy of effective social media content, right? So obviously our way to communicate forward facing to anybody in a digital space is by way and through the channels of social media and social media platforms. So before we get into this episode, the sponsor of this episode, Dish Out, as many of you have seen on my social media channels, some of you may have been inside of the targeting audience inside of the ad that we've been running as well, but our sponsor is Dish Out. It's what our media specialist team has put together to help communicators and content creators be more effective with their message. So if you want to skip ahead and get right to the value of the podcast, it's about 60-70 seconds. If you are a communicator or a content creator, then this is for you. This is your podcast without Dish Out, and this is your podcast with Dish Out. Let me explain. We all know that content is important. In fact, a lot of people say content is king. However, if nobody sees it, it's like it literally doesn't exist. That's why at Dish Out, we believe that context and distribution reigns over content itself. You have to have context for the individual platforms that you're posting on so you can gain traction without being disruptive. And you have to have the ability to distribute multiple forms of media for every one episode that you drop. Now, I'm not gonna lie, you could go out, hire an audio engineer, a designer, and probably a video editor and get by. But most people don't have the time, money, and resources to do that, let alone the complete understanding to lead those efforts effectively and gain the results that you want to get for your podcast, your content, and your brand. You could also use some of these software services out here that audio generate some of this content for you. However, what ends up happening is you start losing the sharp edge and the unique proposition for your individual brand voice, and that's also not effective. Or you could go with Dish Out. You can immediately upload your upcoming content projects, have a dedicated media specialist, clear communication, 24-hour turnaround time, unique source files that belong to your brand, and no contract, and you can cancel any time. I'm so excited for the creations you have coming forth, and even more excited that you chose to join the Dish Out creator team. See you soon. All right, and welcome back to episode 28 of the King Darius Experience. So we are going to hop right into something that we've coined as spotlight videos. So we've had an episode before, if you want to search the title, in regards to earning respect for your long form content, right? The difference between short form and long form content, and how you use short form content to earn the respect and earn the attention that you have for your long form content. So one of the things that we do is we create spotlight videos on our content, on our clients' content, and it is all derived from the same source, right? We talk heavily about how you need to have sort of a pillar, a nucleus, or a center to your narrative, to your message, to your rhetoric and your verbiage, so that way all other forms of media and styles of communication that come out of it are all coming from the same derived source and all have a very similar common thread, right? So what is the anatomy of a spotlight video? Why do we even call it a spotlight video? So obviously, in theatrical terms, when you shine the spotlight on something, you are essentially highlighting the fact that even though there's an entire scene, a larger picture to see, maybe multiple horizons or backdrops or what have you, multiple characters, the spotlight is identifying or highlighting the thing that they want you to focus on, right? So when you have any form of content that is long form, quote unquote, and long form is relative, right? So depending on what style of communication and how often you communicate, the quality of that communication, and what you're trying to drive people to do, your content's long form could be 5 minutes, could be 10 minutes, could be 20, 30. And I have friends, I have industry associates that do content upwards of hour, 2 hours long at a time. And some of the, most famous communicators in the world just have extensive forms of long form content, right? So it's relative to your brand, your experience, your time capacity, etc. But spotlight videos are just a shorter, compartmentalized, more concise and more cohesive message that can be standalone in nature and have psychological elements to it that keep people's attention. It's one thing to get a message in front of people's face. It's an entirely different thing to actually retain their attention, right? Keep that attention. So if we start breaking down the attributes of a spotlight video, you've seen them before, right? You've seen the subtitles, you've seen the captions, you've seen the loading bars, you've seen the titles, you've seen, the grading, the music, the cuts, the punch-ins, all that kind of stuff. You've seen it in many different forms from many different brands, maybe not even realizing that that's the type of content you're looking at. Well, what does a strong title do for a spotlight video, right? A strong title shaves the fat off of any other part of that message that is not relevant to that specific topic. It's very similar to the difference between a landing page and a website. A website is everything we are, all things that we do, menu, sidebar, footer, links, additions, additional context, widgets, all of that kind of stuff, right? And a landing page is a singular focus. No menu, no sidebar, no footer, no distracting links. You're only there for one purpose, and it only has one of two functions. You can either click through to another thing or fill out the form or whatever for lead generation purposes, right? Very similar to content. Your long form content is all the things that you want to talk about, the categorical value that we've talked about providing for people, etc., etc. And then your spotlight videos are that minus all the frills, right? What's the point? What's the 60-second, the 30-second, the 15 to 60-second message that has one focus, one title, and one value proposition out of it? So it taps into the psychology of this is either for you or not. So one really good example, I have my YouTube channel pulled up right here. So let's just kind of look through these titles really quick and see if I can't remember some of this. Or maybe I actually should pull up my Instagram account, because that would provide a little bit more real-time context for you guys. So the last spotlight video, here's a really good example. The last spotlight video that I posted was called Hustle Doesn't Matter Without the Right Focus, right? So when you read that title and that focus of that content, you're either going to agree with that message right away, or you're going to be intrigued enough to watch it, or it's going to be completely irrelevant and you're just going to skip it. I want to invoke that emotion with the spotlight video, because it's either going to hit people who by their own qualifications or disqualifications don't think they're a hustler and are kind of intrigued by hustle grind culture because they see it everywhere, or it's going to hit somebody who has been in that world for a while and don't necessarily, have the results that they want to see from that, or they think they are, so it intrigues them. And why am I saying that hustle doesn't matter? I'm debunking a common, narrative that's pushed inside of a lot of different industries. So that title, without even watching the video, kind of packs a punch. It's ruffling feathers, if you will, and it goes against the grain, so it catches people off guard, right? But it says, if you actually take a look at this, I don't know if you can see it on camera, and I'll turn the volume down so it doesn't disrupt, but if you can see here, it comes from the episode Ask Yourself Hard Questions, and the camera's not going to focus there, so maybe I'll do an overlay or something like that. But Ask Yourself Hard Questions was not necessarily about hustle and focus, right? It was essentially about asking yourself hard questions, so that way your behavior matches the trajectory of where you're going, or the goals and milestones that you want to hit with your professional career, with your creating and all that kind of stuff. But this specific video, right, that podcast episode does not have more than maybe 5 to 8 plays on it. However, that specific spotlight video has 161 views and 26 likes, which is not a whole lot, right? But it's a lot more than the actual podcast episode itself. And there's multiple spotlight videos that have come and will come from that specific podcast episode. So by compartmentalizing just the title itself, I'm able to pack a punch in a focus area that wasn't the initial, derivative, or not the initial derivative, but it wasn't the initial focus of the actual podcast. So it brings in, through a different channel or a different focus, attention that I wouldn't have gotten on that long form content in the first place. So that's one thing that spotlight videos do, right? The anatomy of a spotlight video is a strong title. The second thing would be brand reference. They need to know where the heck this is coming from. You would be astonished the amount of people who will follow your brand, follow what you're doing. It starts obviously as friends and family, and then starts bleeding into secondary and tertiary audiences and circles and connections and networks and all that kind of stuff. And then eventually, and hopefully, more of a mass or broad audience. Well, as those messages are permeating, if you don't have a brand reference, where the heck this content is deriving from, what's the nucleus of this content, then people aren't going to understand the cadence, the consistency, the mantle that you carry, if you want to call it that. What are you standing for, right? Where's this coming from? What's the purpose? What's the vision? What's the mission? Why are you continually saying these messages and putting them in front of my face? This is why you see brand reference in every single one of my breakout pieces of content, whether it's a graphic, a spotlight video, whether it's a vertical video, whether it's multimedia, whether it's one of those, audio waveform motion graphics that you guys see, I always either have the King Darius Experience logo, my little handwritten signature, and or from episode, and then whatever the episode title is, so people know, hey, if you like this little smidget of a piece of content, there's actually more where this came from. So it helps essentially create a bridge for people who want to consume more of that piece of content. It makes it easy for them to consume your brand. Remember, I talked about in a few different episodes that you need to be consumable. It would be one thing to just post, hey, got a new podcast episode, and how many times in a row can you do that before people kind of get annoyed of like, okay, we get it, you have a podcast, versus repackaging it into these little spotlight videos with different centric focuses, so you can hit different opportunities, different pain points, different perspectives, different value props, all of that kind of stuff from the same derived piece of content, and gain more attention for that content. So strong titles, brand reference, and then a huge one is standalone value. A lot of times when people start breaking down their content, their longer form content, their podcasts, their vlogs, their how-to series, their curriculum, when they start breaking it down, they think it's cool enough just to do sort of like a trailer, like an incomplete thought, like, let me just make it hype, let me make it exciting, let me add some music, and then they wonder why it doesn't actually leverage any type of attention back to their longer pieces of content. And that is because that piece of content doesn't have something that we call standalone value, which simply means if somebody were to consume, read, watch, hear, listen to that piece of content, would they actually have standalone value without needing additional context from where that spotlight or where that small piece of content derived from? Can they actually consume that piece of content and not have to consume anything else without getting value from your brand? The reason that's important is because if they have a touch point with your brand, but they have an incomplete experience in that moment, it may seem small and it may not seem that negative, but people always remember how you make them feel, especially when it comes to touch points with your brand. So if the only experience or the only touch point that they have with your brand is an incomplete thought, a partial or a fractional piece of content, that is the light that you begin painting your brand or your content or your message in, and you don't want that. And then finally, you want to create some type of sense of urgency behind your content, right? It's one thing to be like, hey, I've got a podcast, hey, I've got a video series, hey, I've got a vlog, hey, I've got some curriculum, hey, I've got a website, whatever it is that you're trying to promote and have continuity to. It's another thing to put urgency behind it without smacking people in the face. Nobody wants to be leveraged. Nobody wants their experiences to be disrupted and for you to take them somewhere else than they originally intended to go. So one of the things that you can do to kind of increase that urgency, you can add titles, you can add captions, right? You can add loading bars, right? And these all create some level of urgency because it puts a time container around their attention themselves. So they know, people subconsciously know that they're spending their time, right? So whether they're reading a quote, whether they're actually reading the caption that you post, whether they're going through a comment section, consuming a video, whatever people are doing on social media, they're aware of the time that they're spending subconsciously, which is why, when we get to the end of the day or the end of the week, people eventually go on social media, detoxes and all that kind of stuff, because people realize how much time they're spending. And on a micro level, when you're consuming a post and you see captions or you see a loading bar or you see a countdown timer or you see some type of reference that adds urgency to it, it taps into just an instinctual, consumer or psychological level of consumption to where okay, I can keep reading these captions, I can wait until this loading bar reaches the side, or I can wait until that timer goes from 60 all the way down to 0, and then I get the point and I know I'm not wasting too much of my time, right? It's just like, going to a dollar store. If you go to the dollar store, you're probably not going to walk out of there spending $100, $200, $300. So the intent of going there, even subconsciously, when you're going to the dollar store. So your short form content, your spotlight videos, your graphics, your audio waveforms, those end up being sort of like your dollar store where people can come in, pick up an item, know exactly what they're spending, how they're spending their time, and actually get standalone value from that one little piece that they're, consuming. So this is spotlight videos, right? That's one piece of social media content, and that's the breakdown of the anatomy of that content and why it works so effectively, which is why for every one piece of content that I produce, that we distribute, et cetera, we pull 3-4 spotlight videos, let alone 3-4 graphics, 1 to 2 audio waveforms, etc., because we know the more at bats we have with that content, the more attention we're going to get back on the original piece of content. So going from there, one of the things that this does for your brand overall is, and this is going to be a mouthful for some of you, but the explanation hopefully provides a lot of context and value, is exactly this. Your content will start having episodic breadth. And so let me break that down really quick, because your boy likes using crazy jargon and verbiage and stuff like that. Which, by the way, is it verbiage or verbiage? We'll figure it out one day. So episodic breadth, which is what I essentially mean when I say that, is everybody wants depth in their content. They want width. Everybody knows, you grow vertical, you don't grow wide. You don't want to be an inch deep and a mile wide. So you want to have depth to your content. You want to retain attention. People generally know this consciously or subconsciously. Well, in order to do that, one of the things that this short form content starts to do is it begins making your content sort of horizon 1, horizon 2, horizon 3, or cascading or episodic in nature, meaning it's building off of itself. There's sort of tag team or relays that happen between your content through reference points, through building off of one topic, through making multiple parts from a piece of content, multiple references. So when people see 3, 4, 5 spotlight videos, 3, 4, 5 graphics, 3, 4, 5 audio waveforms from one piece of content, it starts adding a sort of evergreen life to your brand voice and your content, because people are saying, man, there's multiple references to this, which subconsciously makes them think whatever this is coming from must be valuable, because now I've seen 5 pieces of content and each one of them pack a valuable punch, which means where it's deriving from must also be very valuable. So it helps you avoid static content. If you notice, a lot of people, regardless of what they're doing, they could be in any industry, they could be in any business model, from just straight services to products to even some of the gimmicky stuff like attention and multi-level marketing and some of this internet marketing stuff or whatever. You can just kind of tell people have a very static voice. They only talk when they need something. They only talk when they're selling something. They only talk when they're showing something off or trying to brag or whatever. They're not in sort of like a value-based content type of system. And let alone if they are doing any type of content, it's not referencing, it's not building off, it's just a bunch of static thoughts. It's like, here's this ebook, here's this video, here's this podcast, here's this piece of content, here's this download, here's this web page. And it's like none of them have cohesive, relation to each other, let alone a common thread to where it can make sense for your audience. I was talking to a creator the other day, and my biggest point to him was, hey, it's one thing for you to understand your message, right? And for you to understand all the categorical breakdowns of why it's important, why it's valuable, why people should take action and all of those things. It's another thing for you to be an effective educator and communicator and relay that in a cohesive and understandable way to people, so that way your voice isn't static and it isn't disruptive to people's experiences. So you build off your ideas, you avoid static content. It ends up being cascading in nature, which means it just goes from one idea to another, hopping, and then what it ultimately does is it creates your network of intelligence. So you ever heard of the phrase something in and around the YouTube, getting lost in the YouTube related trail, right? Where you go to YouTube for one specific reason, and because of optimization in the background, they obviously have bots and algorithms that can read the captions. They can somewhat, interpret the transcription of the voice to text in the background, even if you don't have that option turned on. That's how they recognize content, or maybe you've tagged your videos and all that kind of stuff. So what ends up happening is you get lost in the YouTube related trail because you went there for fitness or for a vlog or for whatever, and then the topics were related just enough to pique your interest for you to click that, and then that loaded 2 or 3 more videos, so you click those ones, loaded 1 or 2 more videos, so, and then that relevance just kind of goes down the downward spiral, or up the staircase if you want to call it, or down the rabbit hole. But it builds your network of intelligence, because you can do this on a smaller scale with your own content. Be your own related trail that people fall down. Hey, in this episode we talk about this value. Oh yeah, and we built off of that in that episode. And oh, if you're watching this spotlight video, and this is from this episode, and by the way, here's our sponsor. If you notice, even my style of communication, you can't consume one piece of my content, even down to my music. In my music, and this is kind of funny, I put Easter eggs in my music. Even in my music, there's always at least one lyrical reference to either another song or another piece of content of mine. And I promise you, if you go through all 27 or 28 projects that I have out music wise, there's always some reference to another song or to another narrative or to another piece of what my brand represents. And I do that because if one pops off, I want other people to know there's more where that came from. I'm not a one trick pony. This isn't just a one skill, one genius, one level of intellect type of communicator. I have multiple levels to who I am, and you just happen to learn of me through this channel. So it kind of builds your network of intelligence to show people I have my hands in many things, not just the thing that was relevant to you. So what you need to make your ultimate goal as a creator is to become a part of your listeners or your consumers, your audience's routine. And the reason this is important is because if you can't penetrate and permeate their daily activity, their routine, right? Hop up in the morning, listen to some music, get in the shower, get ready, have my coffee. You know, obviously during the shutdown, nobody's traveling, but as things open back up, their commutes to work, they're listening to podcasts, listening to music. If you can't be a part of somebody's routine, and you're only, you know, coming from one specific angle, and that's the only way they can consume your content is when you're selling something or when you have an ad or when you need them on your website or whatever, you are not going to be able to effectively push anything or gain traction on anything because you are not a part of their routine. You have to become part of their behavior over words. How do you know when your content's effective? When you have people sending you screenshots, when you have people tagging other people, when you have people letting you know, man, instead of doing X, Y, and Z, I watch your content or I listen to this or I consume this, or you have people hitting you up constantly for more for something or to go deeper in a specific area or to inquire about certain things about who you are and what you do. These are all, you know, not an exhaustive list, but these are all indicators that you are becoming part of your listeners' routine. So you become the source and you become the hub and you're developing a cadence for them. So obviously one of the things that we talk about is that there's behavior behind a lifestyle of content and a lifestyle of value. You creating that value system of communicating all of the time to people. And that creates sort of like a routine. I always use the example, it comes from a musical reference or whatever, but you know, those balloons that have a rubber band at the end, and you kind of have to create a cadence or a pulse in order to get the balloon to, you know, bounce off your hand, go off, come back, bounce off. And it's kind of like, you know, even punching one of those boxing bags that hang down, you have to find your rhythm, right? And you can hear the rhythm as you're doing it. This is sort of like a behavioral reference or metaphor to what you need to become for your listeners and your audience. You need to be one of those subconscious, all right, got up in the morning, consumed this, listen to oh boy, listen to oh girl, did that thing, whatever. It needs to be second nature to people, so that way you're just a part of what they do. You're one of the reasons they go to Instagram. You're one of the reasons they're on TikTok. You're one of the reasons they consistently watch stuff or consume stuff on YouTube or Spotify or Apple or whatever it is that you're, you know, or whatever platforms you're distributing to. You have to become a part of your audience's routine and be their cadence, their stability, their foundation, because then that adds sort of a fortification to your brand voice, and it allows people to know that you are a stable force, right? It's perceived value, but it's still value. It's just like when you walk into a bank, there's a lot of perceived value that goes into very simple things like creating transactions and opening accounts. And it's so funny, won't go into details, but there's obviously still a lot of red tape and bullcrap that happens in the financial industry, but they work very hard, right, to create perceived secure value so you feel comfortable giving your money into their system and them handling something that's a very valuable asset to you. So treat your content as such, treat your narrative as such, create content that's worthy of being inside of people's routines, right, and being a part of their cadence and their schedule. And I promise you everything else will come into fruition and gain traction for you and your brand. So hopefully that was awakening to you. Hopefully that was empowering for you. Other than that, we will see you in the next episode of the King Darius Experience. Peace. New era, I got y'all. Real game, we pop off, no knockoffs. Open eyes, we watch out. Mobilize, won't cop out. COVID-19 cops out, don't flop now. Open skies, we fly now. New agenda, they try now. Most y'all getting real scared of the headlines, we find out. Getting real